I give the call to the Honourable Kyle McGinn.
Thank you, Mr Acting President. I'm pleased to rise today to make a contribution to the debate on the Voluntary Assisted Dying Bill 2019 before this House. This is a tough bill to talk on, and I have no doubt this will be the hardest speech I've done, followed by the hardest vote I've made in this Parliament. People in both the other chamber and in here have spoken about their personal experiences with circumstances that having access to voluntary assisted dying could potentially have assisted in a more humane death. It has been a very powerful and quite sad at times, and I have appreciated the strength members have shown by telling theirs and others' stories. I thank other members for a largely respectful debate so far on this bill, and it has been very interesting debate so far. I have been learning, and as I've been listening to each speech, and thank members for their contributions. I've pondered the moral question to this bill for many months, and have also ensured I seeked out information from both sides of the debate to ensure I would form my own view with a well-informed background and a good cross-section of information as a foundation to form my view. Not only have I done personal research from my own personal view, I've also surveyed my constituency, focusing on the North West Central electorate and the Kalgoorlie electorate where I am based. I came into this research with the knowledge that this subject was very emotional for people, but frankly, I had not had any experience in this area up until engaging into the discussion. Whilst I did lose my grandfather in recent years, he was in Victoria, and I did not find myself confronting the challenges he faced whilst dying. I've been very fortunate, and I haven't had someone in close proximity to me die slowly from a terminal illness. During the 2017 state election, I was well aware of many election commitments the McGowan Labor team had made. And since coming into government, we have been working hard delivering to those commitments, and along with other members in this chamber, have been getting through a lot of legislation making positive change for our communities. This VAD legislation was not part of the election, however, and instead has come from public opinion. So I was not fully prepared for it. I'm 31 years old and, touch wood, haven't had many situations involving death of a loved one, which means have not spent a lot of time thinking about death and the circumstances around dying from a terminal illness. Sadly, last week I did have to face death when I lost my auntie, my beautiful auntie, Auntie Judy McGinn, in a very unfortunate circumstance that surprised us all. Please just give me a moment to give my condolences to my cousins, Judy's son Daniel and daughter Hannah, and my uncle, the love of her life, Uncle Mao. My thoughts are with you all. Not having been in the situation where I've seen the pain people face at the end of their life, I really wanted to get out there and seek the views of my electorate, the medical professionals and other people who understood the issue. Not only did I do a survey, I also met with people on both sides of the debate, including people who were undecided on the legislation but had personal experiences, loved ones who had terminal illnesses. One of the main eye-opening experiences for me was when I visited the Goldfields Regional Palliative Care Unit and spoke with the staff there and toured the rooms. I learnt more about what palliative care is and how critical of a role it plays in end-of-life care in that one day than I had my entire life. The staff were amazing and showed me a class of professionalism that left me in awe of what they do to make the end of life for patients the best they can. Something that struck me from the discussion in the unit and through my survey was the lack of in-home care in my Kalgoorlie region. It was causing people to have to leave their homes, to come to Perth, travel, expenses, stress, family, or they would end up in the palliative care unit in Kalgoorlie. They'd end up in that unit well before they were supposed to be there, which puts a lot of unfair pressure on the system and also unfair stress upon the patient. This is something that must be improved, as regional people deserve the right to be treated at home at the end of their lives. There are many people that choose to live in their town right across my electorate and across other areas in regional WA, and they should be able to choose to die there if they want to as well. We have towns of all sizes where we are upgrading facilities and improving services to try and give people the option to stay where they want to be. In-home care is a critical health need for regional people, and they deserve to be able to access the same quality of health care as someone in the metro area has. Last week, the government announced an additional 8.35 full-time equivalent palliative care positions for the region as part of a new specialist district palliative care team for the Goldfields. A total of $3.6 million has been earmarked for the Goldfields and is set to include the establishment of special district palliative care teams comprising of medical, nursing, allied health and Aboriginal health workers. Palliative care patients who wish to die at home in the Goldfields are now set to access 24-hour nursing care via community-based nursing and telehealth. I was extremely pleased to see this announcement across my entire electorate, with $4.4 million investment in the Kimberley for an additional 9.95 full-time equivalent nurses, $4 million for the Midwest and Gascoyne area, which is 10.85 full-time equivalents, and $4.9 million for the Pilbara, which is an additional 11.8 full-time equivalents. This announcement is in addition to the funding already allocated to this area, bringing the total investment by the state government for palliative care to $224 million over 4 years. Something that has been mentioned to me in this debate in both chambers is how this bill will affect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They already struggle with the health system as it is. I have had and still have fears that this legislation could be used in some way to unfairly disadvantage Indigenous people. I have raised these concerns with the government and have told many people that this cannot be another thing that causes problems and potentially wrongful deaths. We must ensure extra protections are in place to make it clear there are no unfair barriers for our First Nations people. When they access healthcare, they should be accessing healthcare with the trust the healthcare system will be looking after them. We have many excellent nurses and health professionals working across this state, and I have a strong belief there needs to be, without question, a navigator through the VAD system for Indigenous people, and this position must be filled by an Indigenous person. I do not want to hear culturally competent, because too many times do we see somebody coming into a system looking after Indigenous people that's come from Perth and done a cultural course here and ends up out on the lands in communities and does not understand the culture that they're dealing with. And what comes with that is stress, problems, and, I hate to say it, but probably mistakes. The Indigenous person will understand the cultural challenges and language barriers and is a person that the patient can trust. I acknowledge this role must not be joint with palliative care, as I do not want to see a crossover between the two. They have to remain separate. But I believe this role will help ensure we do not see anyone slip through the gap in this legislation, as I do not want to see a wrongful death result from this bill. And I believe if we do not help the most vulnerable, as many members have said, then what are we here for? It is a must for me that there is a commitment to this role in all regions across my electorate. Discussions I have had and heard in this chamber talk about the implementation stage and how that will roll out into the regional areas. I do have concerns that it doesn't state within the bill that there will be an Indigenous navigator in these regions across my electorate. The government, I hope, can explain to me how they're going to roll this out and ensure the House that there will be an Indigenous navigator across my electorate in each region. I've also approached my role as a member of the Legislative Council representing the mining and pastoral electorate with the goal of, to the best of my ability, have an open door to my community and ask what they feel on the issues we face. Politicians constantly get attacked for failing to do this, and regardless of how my record will be remembered in this House, I want to keep that promise to myself and know that I've done everything I could to keep the open door policy to my community. This is why, for me, the survey on VAD was a no-brainer. Some people tried to warn me that it being a very emotional issue, it could be a bad idea to survey the electorate. I knew there would be some angry responses, but I was still confident people who appreciate being given the opportunity to take part in this process. Thousands of surveys went out to every constituent in the Kalgoorlie and North West Central areas. I decided on these two as they were where I spend most of my time, and that's what I had at the time in resources. I got back around 600 responses. My staff did have to get rid of a couple that were just blank, except for some lovely drawings on my face. I won't explain what they put on there, but it wasn't very nice. So thank you to the constituents who did take the time to share their views and write considered responses. I have read through these surveys many times, and each time when I get to the end, I find myself feeling many emotions. Most of all, very sad. I would love to read every response to the chamber here today, but it would take a lot of time to do so. So I'll read out some that summarise some of these ideas presented. Today I'll be reading you an equal amount of yes and no responses to try and give a balanced view. Before I start, I must say I had heard the general response and knew the result would probably come out as a yes, supportive of the legislation. But the percentage split was extremely strong. The result was 80% yes and 20% no. I will say both sides, yes and no, palliative care was mentioned, and it was mentioned as a key thing that must be improved, which I believe we have taken important steps to resolving, and I believe the government is committed to continuing to work in that space to make it better into the future. Something else that was raised both in the survey and in many meetings in my office was how the legislation would affect Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people. That was something that was raised in meetings, through emails and across my survey. The survey sent out asked, would you support the bill legalising voluntary assisted dying? And I printed the link to My Life, My Choice report from the Joint Standing Committee, the Joint Select Committee on the End of Life Choices. After the question, there was the option to tick yes or no, and it also included a blank space to write further comments. Here are some of the responses from the survey, the stories from the mining and pastoral electorate. Some of these responses have to be shortened from the full submission written or have been edited for clarity, but they have not been changed from their original meaning. This person voted yes. There needs to be safeguards to ensure those making a decision for themselves are of sound mind. This might look like having counselling before the decision. There should also be protections to ensure there is no pressure or encouragement to access assisted dying. No. I've been reading about elder abuse, and it did not shock or surprise me, as our society seems to have screwed values. We weep for murderers who receive a capital punishment sentence, yet are quite unconcerned about putting ageing grandma to sleep. Thank you for seeking the opinion of a voter. Yes, my mum was terminally ill. As her health deteriorated, she couldn't do anything herself, even eat. She didn't want us to see her or remember her like this. After all, she was the main person who kept the house and the family together. Knowing she wasn't getting any better, she didn't want to live and kept suffering until her body gave up. How cruel is that? No. You want my opinion? Then this is it. Life is very precious. We're all born into the world naturally, and unless you're born with IVF assistance, and so we should all die naturally when our time is up, pain and all, without having some opinionated doctor and people coming in to speed up the process. If you're a very sick person and that's what you want, bad luck, let nature take its course. Otherwise, you're opening the door for family members and health professionals to control your life. Yes, I would fully support it as long as the legislation covered all aspects. There are many in nursing homes with no known family who would think it was beneficial, but only if they are capable of making the decision themselves. If incapable, then no. No. First abortion, now this. Emotion is now being used to opening the gates to killing the most vulnerable. Yes, dear Kyle, my mum is 96 and does not want to be here anymore. She has asked the doctor to put her to sleep, but he said no. I hope one day, Kyle, you can help so she can have her say. No. Suicide should be prevented, not a treatment option. Please put more funding into palliative care instead of encouraging suicide. I appreciate that you have sought our opinions on this issue. Yes. When you have family who has cancer, watching them turn into a pain-ridden skeletal version of themselves is incredibly hard for them and the family. Make it about choice. No. Voluntary assisted dying is suicide. War, famine and disease claim enough lives as it is, so why would we allow suicide to claim any more? The Australian Government support various suicide prevention programs, yet this bill may potentially legalise suicide. Why would the Australian Government and its representatives knowingly support any form of killing? Genocide, murder and voluntary assisted dying, aka suicide, all result in the extermination of life. We should be preserving life, not destroying it. There are always alternatives if the government's responsibility and duty to explore every possible avenue, as death is not an option. Yes, it is about time our representatives do what the majority of people of the state want, not what they personally believe. As members can tell, there's some very emotional responses, and I believe it's critical to get these on record because this comes straight from the mining and pastoral electorate. No. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one to speak out for me. Yes, after 10 years of chemotherapy, my husband wanted this choice. But after seeing the work of palliative care team, I also feel this is an option that should be utilised more. No. Thank you, Kyle, for taking the time and spending the money to conduct this survey. I trust you received plenty of responses. I cannot support such a bill as I believe life is God-giver and is in his hands, according to the words of the Apostle Paul. Do you not know that there are a temple of God and the Spirit of God dwells in you, that you are not your own? Corinthians 6:19-20. Yes, my life, my choice. I do not believe that people should be condemned to live beyond the lifespan that they feel comfortable with. In particular, people suffering from medical conditions that reduce their quality of life. No, life belongs to God. He alone has the right to take it. Gen 2:7, and the Lord formed man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living being. Euthanasia is murder. Murder is intentional, wanton taking of someone's life. Ex 20:13, you shall not murder. This is a commandment directed to the sanctity of life. Pain, tax and death are all part of life. Those died before us were not murdered. Why are people going to routinely be killed? Government is not the owner of life. Yes, I watched my mum first die from a long battle with stomach and bowel cancer. Then my dad didn't want to be here after that. Then with dementia, he starved himself to death, and that was awful. No. For to ask someone else to do the unthinkable in the name of mercy and compassion is to shift the burden of responsibility to other shoulders and to invite another person to bear the guilt. As for asking medical personnel to bear the guilt of athemia, all its ethics are devoted to the preservation of life. Australian author Colleen McCulloch. Address given at Parliament House. My sentiments exactly. Thank you for giving me a chance to voice my opinion. Yes, the decision to end one's life because of much pain and suffering caused by an incurable disease or disability should be the right of every mature adult in Australia. This right should not be used as a political football. This one I thought was quite interesting and sort of summed up how views can be very different. My vote is yes. My husband's vote is no. Sorry for the stalemate, which I thought was quite interesting. I'm sure they have a very interesting household and plenty of debates. No, we are sending a double message to our young people. We are telling them not to commit suicide, but then saying it's okay to take life when it gets old and difficult. This is a dangerous bill. In the countries where it is legal, abuses have occurred and safeguards have meant nothing. Yes, my husband recently passed away from cancer. It was cruel to watch. No. As a registered trained nurse with 45 years' experience, I cannot nominate any one time I may have even considered the possibility. There is always something a thoughtful person can do without such drastic and sinful actions. Yes, please, please, please pass this bill. As a registered nurse, I know that many people suffer uncomfortable deaths despite the best palliative care. As a daughter, I suffered with my mother as she begged me to help her. It all ended as she gasped for breath 6 weeks later. No, I urge you to vote against the Voluntary Assisted Dying Bill. This bill will place elderly and vulnerable Western Australians at risk. The bill says that patients are at no point obliged to continue with the assisted dying process. But a mere written guarantee can't contend with the subtle, coercive influence of family members and the hospital officials with strong financial incentives to relieve themselves of the burden of a sick and elderly people. Yes, for anyone who has lost loved ones to terminal illness, this is a no-brainer. I suggest you go visit the palliative care unit at Kalgoorlie Hospital. If that doesn't make up your mind, nothing will. And I did go visit the palliative care unit after that. No, only God haters would agree to this, and you, will answer to God for it. Woe unto them that decree unrooted decree. Wow, that wording's just too much for me. Woe unto them that call evil God and God evil, is 5:20. He who justifies the wicked and who condemns the just, both of them are an abomination to the Lord. He who is not with me is against me, Matt 12:30. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God, 10:31. Yes, my children have already been told I do not wish to be revived. Should I not be able to tell the nursing staff myself? They must let me go. I do not want my family to see me die slowly. No, I work in health and have done so for 40 years. I helped hundreds of thousands of people live meaningful and comfortable lives to their natural death. Palliative care works. Yes, we also support increased mental health services in regional areas, palliative care outside of metro areas, variety of high-quality in-home aged care services, better Centrelink benefits for carers, natural burial and other innovative post-death options. No, I wish to register my opposition to the bill to allow voluntary assisted suicide. All West Australians should have full access to quality palliative care before they need to make the choice to try suicide. Suicide is an act of desperation that no one should feel forced into because they don't have access to other options. Is the bottom line that it's actually cheaper to allow people to kill themselves rather than them treat them properly? Yes, having watched both my parents die slowly with no dignity, I sincerely wish that my children do not have to witness the same excruciatingly painful end of my life. It's really important to my family and friends that this option is there if ever needed. Having seen people having to suffer at the end of their lives is heartbreaking, especially if palliative care options are not working for them. Dear Kyle, would I support a bill legalising voluntary assisted dying? The question presupposes that death is a possibility, and as there is no evidence in existence that being actually die, this makes asking the question of a nonsensical exercise. That was an interesting one to understand. Yes, don't let your religion or views affect the outcomes for people who do not hold those same views. If you do not want to use VAT in the future, then you certainly won't have to. That should not mean that I can't use it. No, I would not support a bill legalising voluntary assisted dying. I ask you to focus your attention on improving palliative care availability for all Western Australians. Better palliative care options will really improve end-of-life choices, whilst legalised euthanasia and assisted suicide will only result in more coercion of the elderly and less real choice. Yes, my auntie died 8 years ago after a very long and distressing death. She had refused medication and food as she wanted to end her life. It was terrible to watch her suffer. There was nothing peaceful about it. I myself had breast cancer 18 years ago, and if I'm ever faced with the reality it has returned, I want the option to die at home with my family around me. I feel like the time is right for me. Please vote for the voluntary assisted dying and not stop me from having my choice. Thank you in anticipation. Members, that is just a few of the responses I've received, and my staff have said, especially in the last few weeks, we have seen another flood of letters in the post, emails and phone calls to my electorate office. As you can see, I meant it when I read through all these responses. At the end of it, I felt emotionally broken. Someone who hasn't experienced it much, I am absolutely grateful that I took the time to survey them to electorates to get a sample of their stories and of what they want to see me do. It's simple for us to say that we understand our electorates and we're in touch. It's another thing when you get them responses and it's sort of what you thought the electorate was thinking. 80% yes, 20% no is what everyone's spoken about, and that's the exact result I got. It's very clear an issue that the people feel passionately about. Members, I hope everyone can understand what a powerful response it was and continues to be for my electorate. I would like to thank all the people that took the opportunity and the time to contact me with their views and have helped to guide me through this very, very tough decision. And I ensure I make the decision that I can live with. I would also like to mention that I have some aunties that are all nurses. And one of my aunties, Auntie Jeanette, is a specialist palliative care nurse in Victoria. I've spoken with her about what she believes she would do in this situation. And she said that she fully supports voluntary assisted dying after working in the industry for that long. I've taken that on board. I've also spoken to my sister, Caddy. Caddy's been working as an assistant nurse for 11 years in aged care in 3 different states and 6 different workplaces ranging from nursing facilities to hostels, and has also worked 8 months in a remote community off Darwin. It has always been hard for her to care for residents that no longer want to live. These are in her words. Due to terminal illness. Having suffered a stroke, they may be unable to feed themselves, wash themselves, or do normal day-to-day activities. Just recently, she cared for a lady who was 90 years old and was diagnosed with emphysema and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. She had smoked heavily for 50 years and she needed oxygen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the rest of her life. Without it, she could not breathe and would gasp for air. When Caddy used to attend to her cares, she couldn't do much due to being exhausted from any movements, such as putting on her shoes and pulling up her pants. At the last stages of her COPD, she asked Caddy and her family continuously, "Please help me die. This is not living." Caddy is a firm believer in voluntary assisted dying if monitored very closely and in consultation with a doctor. She just thinks you should be able to die with dignity. I will share one last story from my constituent of mine, and then I'll return to my seat. This story is from Angie Miller from Kalgoorlie, Boulder. I met Angie at a get-together in Kalgoorlie welcoming the arrival of Belinda Tay, who walked across Australia from Melbourne to deliver her message to the WA Parliament. I must say Belinda is a really amazing person and has shown me true passion for her beliefs, and I think she has done amazing work on advocacy in this space. These are the words of Angie. My father, Dusty Miller, was a Vietnam veteran and founder of the now iconic Birdsville Bakery. In August 2017, just as he had retired, Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 bladder cancer. Dad fought hard and went through all treatment options, including having his bladder removed. During a brief reprieve from the cancer, Dad bought his dream house along with his dream boat. Dad had a lot to live for, yet his cancer returned very quickly, along with multiple other health complications. Due to Dad's allergy to morphine and other traditional pain relief, doctors struggled to find pain medication that was suitable for his needs. During one hospital stay, while doctors were experimenting with different pain relief, Dad would see bugs crawling on the walls, amongst other things. These, of course, were hallucinations. Countless times throughout the day, and with numerous tubes attached to him, Dad would try to get out of his bed and leave the hospital. He would yell at me as I would have to stop him and tell him to get back to his bed. Finally, doctors found a rarely used liquid morphine suitable for Dad. Although his sanity returned, it made him drowsy, and all he did was sleep. Dad was sent home, yet his complications continued to grow. Knowing that medical intervention could not prolong his life and in acute constant pain, my dad repeatedly asked for assistance from medical staff to end his life. He was always met with the same answer: we can't. Dad announced on at least 2 occasions that he was going to starve himself. It broke my heart, and it was coming to this, and this was how I was going to watch him die. However, Dad's love of food was so strong, and perhaps his last pleasure, that he just couldn't do it. Because Dad slept so much, his body lay motionless. He developed a blood clot. He called the ambulance, I called the ambulance, and while we waited half an hour for it to arrive, Dad howled in pain and also cried out, "This is a blessing, as this will finish me off quicker." When the ambulance finally got there, the paramedics had to get permission from senior staff to administer the green whistle. This was because of my dad's allergies to pain relief. This was more time in intense pain. While waiting, Dad was begging the paramedics to put him on the pump. What he was referring to is the medication pump used for patients right after the end of life. We're beyond ingesting medication. Dad wanted out, even if it meant being put into an induced coma. I'm still haunted by one of the meetings with the palliative care nurses and locum doctor. Still begging for his life to end, the palliative care nurse asked, "Why don't you want to prolong your life?" Dad, while crying, replied, "Because I have no quality of life. If I had a knife on this table in front of me, I would take it and push it through my heart." Dad went on to explain that he would have killed himself by now, but he didn't want his children to find the mess. Their response was, "We still can't." Ultimately, the treatment for the blood clot just led to further complications where Dad ended up bleeding profusely into the bag, which was the replacement for his bladder. 2 days later, when the doctors decided to slowly increase the morphine, the nurses tried to move Dad's body to reduce the chances of bed sores in pain. Dad yelled out, "No, no, no." A few hours later, Dad passed away. He did not die at home with dignity like he wanted. I know that if voluntary assisted dying laws existed, my father's prolonged suffering could have been avoided. Thank you, Angie, for allowing me to share that story. That is very sad, and after lots of research and looking into the issue through my electorate and taking this matter very seriously, I give my support for the second reading of this bill. I am looking forward to the committee stage to go through the bill itself, and I will be withholding my right to vote on the third reading speech until after the committee of the whole to see what amendments pass through. I would like to thank the work done by the Select Committee. It was tough reading, but it was very broad, and it was also very educational to go towards my decision. That's both reports as well. Thank you, members and Madam President, for listening to this speech and hearing the views of my electorate in the mining and pastoral region. I encourage everyone to remain respectful and considerate as we continue to talk about this difficult and emotional subject. Thank you.